The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space. Ambassador Tejo walked forward, his black diplomatic uniform sharp against the colorful chaos of alien delegates filling the circular hall. Behind him, Admiral Sujin and Chief Negotiator Boram followed in perfect formation, their faces calm and unreadable. The chamber fell silent as the three humans took their place at the central podium. Above them, thousands of alien beings watched from floating platforms that circled the room like a twisted galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices working in hundreds of languages. Council Speaker Velthak rose from the highest platform, his insect-like body towering over the assembly. His forearms spread wide in what passed for a welcoming gesture among his people. The chittering sounds he made were quickly converted into standard galactic speech by the translators. "Welcome, representatives of humanity," Velthak announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority. "We gather today to discuss the Council's generous offer of protection and guidance for your young species." Tejo looked up at the alien leader without moving. He had practiced this moment many times, but being here felt different. The weight of every human colony, every ship, every life in space rested on what happened next. "The terms are simple," continued Velthak, clearly expecting this to be a normal negotiation. "Your outer colonies will be placed under Council protection. Your military forces will accept our oversight. In exchange, humanity will receive the benefits of Council membership and trade rights." Murmurs filled the chamber as other alien delegates nodded their approval. This was how things always worked. Young species were given an offer they couldn't refuse. Some tried to negotiate better terms. Others asked for time to consider, but in the end, they all accepted. The Council's system had worked for over 3,000 years. Velthak gestured toward Tejo. "Ambassador, please present your species' response to our generous terms." Tejo stepped forward to the speaking platform. The chamber's acoustics carried his voice clearly to every corner of the massive space. He looked up at Velthak, then slowly turned to face the assembled delegates. "No," he said. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. The translation systems worked perfectly, sending the simple response to every species present in their own language, but somehow none of them seemed to understand it. Velthak's mandibles clicked in confusion. "I'm sorry, Ambassador. Perhaps there was a translation error. Could you repeat your response?" "No," Tejo said again, louder this time. "Humanity refuses your terms." The chamber erupted. Alien voices rose in a dozen different pitches and tones. The amphibious Kethtar representatives began their nervous hissing. The crystalline Zephnal delegates chimed in discordant notes that hurt to hear. Flying creatures swooped between platforms in agitation. "Order," Velthak commanded, his voice booming over the chaos. "Order in the chamber." When the noise finally died down, he turned back to Tejo. "Ambassador, perhaps you misunderstood. This is not a negotiation. The Council has decided that humanity requires guidance. We are offering you the chance to accept this guidance willingly." Boram stepped forward, her voice clear and professional. "Speaker Velthak, with respect, we understood your terms perfectly. We also understand that you expect us to make counteroffers or ask for modifications. We will not be doing either. But you must," stammered Councillor Nethral from a nearby platform. The ancient being had overseen hundreds of these ceremonies. Every species negotiates. It's how civilized beings conduct business. Admiral Sujin spoke for the first time, her military bearing unmistakable even to alien eyes. "We studied your history carefully before coming here. We know how your negotiations work. Species ask for small changes, you grant some and refuse others. They feel like they won something, and then they sign treaties that make them your vassals." "That's not," Velthak began, but Tejo cut him off. "It is exactly how it works," the ambassador said calmly. "The hegemony of Krix asked for mining rights to 3 systems instead of 5. You gave them 4 and they felt grateful. Now they provide raw materials to the Council at below market prices, and their military serves as your border guards. Uncomfortable. Shifting rippled through the Krix delegation. The Federated Worlds of Zan wanted to keep their research facilities independent. You agreed, but required Council oversight of all projects. Now every scientific breakthrough they make belongs to the Council. More uncomfortable movement from another delegation. "The pattern is clear," Boram continued. "You offer protection from threats you often create yourselves. You provide trade opportunities while controlling the terms. You grant membership in a club where you make all the rules. Velthak's compound eyes glittered with something that might have been anger. You are a young species. You don't understand the dangers of this galaxy. Without council protection, we'll manage, Tejo interrupted. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the journey to the stars without your help. We'll continue to do so. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was shock. In 3,000 years of council history, no species had ever simply refused without offering alternatives. This is madness, whispered Trade Minister Kelvox from the economic platform. They're committing galactic suicide, are we? Admiral Sujin asked, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Or are we the first species in 3 millennia brave enough to tell you the truth? And what truth is that? Velthak demanded. Tejo looked around the chamber one final time, meeting the alien gazes without flinching. That you need us more than we need you. The explosion of sound that followed was deafening. Delegates shouted, chimed, hissed, and roared in dozens of different ways. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for economic sanctions. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Through it all, the 3 human representatives stood calmly at the center of the storm. They had delivered their message exactly as planned. Earth's position was clear and simple. Humanity would not be joining the Council's system of controlled membership. Velthak raised all 4 arms for silence, but it took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a threat that had cowed countless species before. Very well, humans. If you will not accept our protection willingly, you will learn to regret refusing it. This session is concluded. As the alien delegates began filing out, many casting dark looks at the human delegation, Tejo, Sujin, and Boram turned and walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the now quiet chamber. They had just done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had said no to the most powerful organization in known space. And they had done it without offering alternatives, apologies, or explanations beyond the simple truth. Behind them, Velthak watched them go, his alien mind struggling to process what had just happened. In 3,000 years, the Council had never encountered a species that simply refused to play their game. He didn't yet realize that humanity hadn't just refused to play the Council's game. They had just changed the rules of the entire galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since the humans walked out of the Council chamber, and Velthak was beginning to understand what panic felt like. He stood in his private office high above the Council station, looking out at the busy traffic of ships moving through space. Usually the sight calmed him. Today it only reminded him of the problem. Many of those ships were human vessels moving freely through Council space as if nothing had changed. They followed all traffic laws, paid their docking fees, and conducted business normally. But they completely ignored every attempt at diplomatic contact. The door chimed and Council Military Advisor Krexnor entered, his reptilian features showing the strain of the past weeks. Behind him came Intelligence Chief Mordal, a gray-skinned being whose people specialized in gathering information across the galaxy. Report, Velthak commanded without turning from the window. The humans maintained complete communication silence, Krexnor said, his voice rough with frustration. No responses to official messages, no acknowledgement of diplomatic channels. It's like they've decided we don't exist. Worse than that, Mordal added, sliding a data tablet across Velthak's desk. They're acting like they never needed us to begin with. Trade continues normally with dozens of species. Their colonies are expanding. Their ships move freely through space. They're conducting themselves as a fully independent galactic power. Velthak picked up the tablet and scrolled through the intelligence reports. What he saw disturbed him more than open hostility would have. The humans weren't hiding or cowering. They were thriving. How is this possible? He muttered. Every species needs council oversight to manage interstellar relations. Apparently not, Mordal replied grimly. Our analysis shows they've been building independent diplomatic relationships for decades. While we focused on their official government, they were quietly establishing trade agreements, defense pacts, and research partnerships through private companies and colonial governments. Krexnor slammed his fist on the desk. Then we show them the consequences of defying the Council. Send a battle fleet to their borders. Remind them why species seek our protection. I tried that, Velthak admitted, his voice quiet. Last week, Admiral Yujin took 3 cruiser squadrons to the edge of human space, and, Krexnor prompted, they were met by a single human destroyer. Mordal leaned forward. What happened? Velthak's mandibles clicked nervously. The human captain, some young officer named Jin Wu, told our admiral that if the council wanted to schedule a meeting, they could make an appointment through proper channels. That's, Krexnor sputtered. Insulting. Yes, but effective. Velthak turned back to the window. Yujin's tactical officer reported that the destroyer was supported by defensive platforms that could have destroyed our entire force. The humans weren't afraid. They were polite. The 3 aliens sat in uncomfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Mortal spoke up. There's something else. We have Dr. Haywan, the human xenobiologist, still on the station. Several council members have approached her informally, hoping she might provide insight into human thinking. What did she tell them? Velthak asked. That she's just a scientist with no diplomatic authority. She's been perfectly friendly, continuing her research as if nothing has changed. When Counselor Kelvox asked her about Earth's position, she said she doesn't make policy decisions and suggested he contact the appropriate government offices. Krexnor growled in frustration. It's like they don't understand the situation. No, Velthak said slowly, a terrible realization forming in his mind. They understand perfectly. They just don't care. Meanwhile, in the research labs deep within the station, Dr. Haywan carefully cataloged samples from a recently discovered world. Her work studying alien microbiology was genuinely important to her, and she saw no reason to stop just because of political tensions. When her lab door chimed, she looked up to see Counselor Nethril standing hesitantly in the doorway. The ancient being's multiple eyes blinked nervously. Dr. Haywan, might I have a word? Of course, Counselor. Please come in. She gestured to a chair designed for his species. Is this about my research proposal for the deep space bacteria study? No, I wanted to ask. That is, I hoped you might explain. He paused, clearly struggling with how to phrase his question. Why won't your people negotiate? Haywan looked genuinely puzzled. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. The council made humanity an offer. Your ambassadors refused without counter-proposals. This isn't how civilized species conduct business. Oh, that? Haywan nodded and returned to her microscope. Well, I suppose they didn't want what you were offering. But they must want something. Everyone wants something. She agreed absently, adjusting her equipment. I want to understand how these bacteria adapt to vacuum conditions. You probably want the council to continue operating smoothly. My daughter wants to visit the ice caves on Europa. Everyone wants different things. Nethral's confusion deepened. But what does humanity want from the council? Haywan looked up, her expression genuinely confused. Nothing, I think. Why would we want anything from you? The simplicity of her answer hit Nethral like a physical blow. Not contempt, not anger, not defiance, just nothing. Humanity literally wanted nothing from the council. Back on Earth, General Wu Jin stood in the command center deep beneath the capital city, watching displays that showed the disposition of every human ship and military installation across dozens of star systems. The room hummed with quiet efficiency as officers coordinated defensive preparations. Status report, he commanded. All colony worlds report ready status, replied his aide, Colonel Jiwoo. Fleet deployments are complete. Defensive platforms are online. Intelligence networks are active. Any council movement? Some probe missions along our borders, but nothing serious. They seem to be testing our responses rather than preparing for actual conflict. Wu Jin nodded grimly. They're confused. In their experience, species either submit or fight back desperately. We're doing neither. Sir, if I may ask, what are we doing? The general smiled, an expression that held no warmth. We're showing them that their entire system depends on species believing they need council permission to exist. Once that belief disappears, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Both officers understood the implications. Above them in the government complex, President Ji Hai was receiving similar reports from around human space. The message was consistent. Humanity was strong, prepared, and completely uninterested in council approval. Her secretary announced that the Kethtar ambassador was requesting an urgent meeting. Then the Zephnol trade representative. Then 3 other alien delegations. They're starting to panic, her chief of staff observed. Good, Jihai replied. Fear makes people think clearly. The council has been running on autopilot for so long, they forgot that their power comes from consent, not divine right. In his office high above the council station, Velthak finally understood the magnitude of what humanity had done. They hadn't declared war on the council. They hadn't demanded changes or reforms. They had simply opted out of the entire system. And by doing so, they had revealed the system's greatest weakness. It only worked as long as everyone agreed to participate. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had said no. And the galaxy was watching to see what would happen next. The emergency session of the council's inner circle had been going for 6 hours, and Velthak could feel his patience wearing thin. Around the curved table, representatives from the council's most powerful member species argued in circles, while the human problem grew worse by the day. Economic sanctions, insisted Trade Minister Kelvox for the third time. Cut off their access to council markets. Force them to negotiate. We tried that, Mordal replied wearily. They simply increase trade with non-council species. Some of our own members are quietly dealing with them anyway because human goods are reliable and fairly priced. Then military pressure, growled Krexnor, a show of force to remind them of reality. Velthak's mandibles clicked in annoyance. We tried that too. Admiral Eugen's expedition was educational. The memory still stung. Eugen had taken the 5th Battle Fleet, 12 heavy cruisers and their escort ships to the edge of human space. It was meant to be a demonstration of council power, the kind of display that had brought dozens of species to heel over the centuries. Instead, they had been met by Captain Jinwu commanding a single destroyer called the Soul's Pride. The conversation, recorded by both fleets, had already become legend among military officers throughout the galaxy. When Eugen's massive flagship hailed the tiny human vessel and demanded to speak with human leadership, Jinwu's response had been delivered in perfectly polite tones. Admiral, if the council wishes to schedule a diplomatic meeting, you can contact our embassy through normal channels. If you're here for military purposes, I should mention that you're currently in the targeting solution of about 40 defensive platforms, and frankly, that seems like a poor tactical position for a diplomatic mission. The platforms had been invisible until Jinwu mentioned them. Advanced stealth technology kept them hidden until human sensors painted the council fleet with targeting beams that their ship's computers suddenly detected everywhere. Eugen had found himself facing a choice: retreat gracefully, or start a war he couldn't win with ships that were suddenly sitting ducks in a carefully prepared kill zone. He chose retreat. The humans have been preparing for this. Mordal continued his report. Our intelligence suggests they've been building defensive networks for decades. While we assumed they were primitive newcomers to galactic politics, they were quietly becoming a major military power. Impossible, Councillor Netherall protested. No species achieves that kind of capability without council oversight and approval. Apparently they do, Velthak said grimly, and that's not our biggest problem. He activated the chamber's holographic display showing a star map of council space. Red indicators marked locations where the human situation was causing problems. The Terran Federation has been contacted by 17 different species in the past month, all seeking direct diplomatic relations outside council channels. 3 minor species have formally requested protection agreements with humanity instead of the council. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They're building their own power block, whispered. Kelvox, worse, Velthak replied. They're demonstrating that the council is unnecessary. At that moment, Dr. So Young was in her laboratory aboard the research station orbiting the council homeworld, pretending to focus on her xenobiology work while monitoring council communications. The humans had left their scientists in place for exactly this purpose, not as spies, but as observers. Her research was genuine and valuable, studying how different species' immune systems responded to various pathogens. But her real job was to understand how the council was reacting to humanity's unprecedented refusal to participate in their system. The panicked communications she was intercepting painted a clear picture. The council was discovering that their authority depended entirely on species believing they needed council approval to exist. When her door chimed, she looked up to see Dr. Kethamal, one of the Kethtar researchers she had worked with for months. So young, the amphibious being said nervously. Might I ask you something unofficial? Of course. What's on your mind? My government is curious about human trade policies, specifically how one might establish direct commercial relationships with human colonies. So Young smiled. That's not really my area, but I believe you can contact the Trade Ministry on Earth directly. I'm sure they'd be happy to discuss opportunities. Without council oversight? Why would you need council oversight for trade between your species and mine? The question hung in the air like a revelation. Kethmal had never considered that his people could simply trade directly with humans, without asking the council's permission first. Meanwhile, far from the council station, Captain Dong-hyun was having a similar conversation aboard his merchant vessel in orbit around the Kethtar homeworld. 3 trade ministers had come aboard officially to inspect his cargo manifests, but their real interest was in the implications of human independence. Your people really operate without council approval? Asked Minister Yulnoth. We operate according to our own laws and the laws of whatever system we're visiting, Dong-hyun replied. Same as anyone else, I assume. But who mediates disputes? Who enforces agreements? Dong-hyun looked genuinely puzzled. We have courts and arbitrators. If there's a problem between species, we work it out directly. Why involve a third party? The concept was revolutionary to beings who had lived under council mediation their entire lives. Back in human space, Lieutenant Min-ho sat in the Cyber Warfare Center aboard the defense station, protecting the Sol system approaches. His job was to monitor council fleet movements and ensure that any hostile forces found their computer systems experiencing unexpected difficulties. He didn't need to actively attack anything. Human cyber technology had advanced far beyond what the council expected, and their ship systems were vulnerable to techniques that their programmers had never anticipated. When council probe ships entered human space, their navigation systems began reporting false positions. Their communication arrays developed mysterious static. Their weapons targeting computers started calculating incorrect firing solutions. Nothing permanently damaging, nothing that couldn't be fixed with a simple restart. But enough to make any council commander think twice about pressing an attack. Contact on the perimeter, reported Sergeant Yuna from the sensor station. Council light cruiser broadcasting diplomatic codes. Let it through, Min-ho commanded. But give them the standard treatment. Understood? Their nav computer is now telling them they're 3 light years from their actual position. The message was clear. Human space was protected by technology the council couldn't counter. Any attempt at military action would be met with capabilities they couldn't match. Dr. Kyung-soo, observing council sessions from the diplomatic gallery, watched as the realization slowly dawned on the assembled aliens. For 3,000 years, their system had worked because every species eventually accepted that they needed council protection and guidance. Humanity's simple refusal had exposed the fundamental flaw in that logic. What if a species was strong enough that they genuinely didn't need protection? What if they were advanced enough to handle their own diplomatic relationships? What if they were successful enough that other species wanted to emulate them, instead of joining the council? The questions were spreading through the galaxy like wildfire, and the council had no answers. In her weekly report to Earth, Dr. So-young summarized the situation in simple terms. The council is discovering that their entire authority structure depends on voluntary participation. Without the threat of genuine consequences, they have no way to force compliance. Species are beginning to question why they need council, permission for activities they could handle themselves. The report concluded with an observation that would have chilled council leadership if they had seen it. Estimate complete dissolution of current council authority structure within 18 months if current trends continue. The humans hadn't declared war on the council. They had done something far more devastating. They had proved that the council was unnecessary. The morning briefing in Velthak's office had become a daily exercise in documenting the collapse of everything he had known about galactic politics. Intelligence Chief Mordal stood before a holographic display showing the current state of council authority. And the picture was terrifying. 17 species have now established direct diplomatic relations with humanity, Mordal reported, his gray skin looking paler than usual. The Kethtar have signed a trade agreement that completely bypasses council oversight. The Zephnol have requested human technical advisors for their industrial sector. And our response? Velthak asked, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. We've issued formal protests and threatened sanctions. The species in question have responded by citing the same legal precedent humanity established: voluntary participation in council activities. Krexnor slammed his fist on the desk. There is no such precedent. Council authority is absolute. Was absolute, Mortal corrected quietly. Turns out it was only absolute as long as everyone agreed it was. The door chimed and Councillor Nethrall entered, looking every one of his 1,000 years of age. Speaker Velthak, we have a problem. The hegemony of Krix has formally withdrawn from council military agreements. Velthak's mandibles clicked in shock. That's impossible. The Krix have been council allies for 800 years. Their new premier, Krixtal, announced that they no longer require council protection. They've negotiated a mutual defense pact with the Terran Federation instead. The room fell silent as the implications hit home. The Krix controlled 3 major trade routes and provided significant military support to council operations. Their defection was more than a political loss, it was a strategic disaster. How? Velthak whispered. Apparently, human negotiators offered them something we never did. A partnership between equals instead of a protection agreement between superior and vassal. Meanwhile, in a secure conference room on the human colony world of New Sol, President Ji Hai was meeting with Premier Krixtal via holographic projection. The insectoid leader's image flickered slightly due to the distance, but his enthusiasm was clear. The Krix people are excited about this partnership, Krixtal was saying. For centuries, we've provided resources and military support to the Council, with minimal input on policies that affected us. Your proposal offers us genuine participation in decision-making. The principle is simple, Ji Hai replied. Independent species working together by choice, not by mandate. Each retains full sovereignty while cooperating for mutual benefit. And if disputes arise between our peoples, we handle them directly, species to species. No bureaucratic middleman telling us what we can and can't agree to. The concept was revolutionary to a being who had spent his entire political career navigating council bureaucracy. Back on the council station, Dr. So Young was observing something unprecedented in the council chamber, a formal session with empty seats. The Krix delegation was gone. The Terran Federation had never taken their assigned seats. 3 minor species had simply stopped sending representatives. For the first time in millennia, the council was trying to function while species actively opted out of their system. Speaker Velthak called for order, but the remaining delegates were too busy arguing among themselves to listen. Some demanded military action against the rebellion. Others suggested reforms to entice species back. A growing minority questioned whether the council should continue in its current form. The humans have created a crisis, declared War Minister Krexnor, his reptilian features twisted with anger. They must be stopped before they destroy everything we've built. What exactly have we built? Asked Councillor Yelnara of the Spiral Nebula Confederation. A system where we tell everyone else what to do and they comply out of fear? Maybe it's time to ask if that's worth preserving. The debate that followed was unlike anything in council history. For the first time, member species were openly questioning the fundamental assumptions of their civilization. Dr. So Young quietly activated her personal recorder. Earth would want to hear this. Across the galaxy, the effects were spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. On the mining world of Kethler Prime, Minister Yulnoth was explaining to his people why they had signed a trade agreement with humanity without asking council permission. The humans offered us fair prices for our minerals and technical assistance with our mining operations, he said to the assembled crowd. When I asked the council for similar terms, they told me our pricing was not their concern, and we should be grateful for their protection. But what if the council retaliates? Called out a voice from the crowd. Retaliates how? Yulnoth replied. By withdrawing protection we never needed. By cutting off trade that was never fair to begin with. The humans have shown us that we were stronger than we thought. Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds. Species that had accepted council oversight for generations were suddenly questioning why they needed permission to conduct their own affairs. Captain Donghyun was experiencing the results firsthand as his merchant vessel made stops throughout the former council trade network. At every port, local officials were quietly asking about direct trade relationships with human colonies. We've been sending our best agricultural products to the council distribution centers, explained Port Administrator Velnock. "On the farming world of Green Star, they resell our food for 10 times what they pay us and tell us it's fair because they provide security." "What security?" Dong Hyun asked. "I've been trading in this sector for 5 years and never seen a pirate ship or hostile force." Exactly what we've been wondering. The economic implications were staggering. The Council's trade monopoly was dissolving, as species realized they could deal directly with each other for better terms. Lieutenant Min Ho, monitoring Council military communications from his cyber warfare station, was watching the strategic situation deteriorate from the Council's perspective. Their fleet commanders were reporting equipment failures, navigation problems, and communication breakdowns whenever they tried to operate near human space or the space of human allies. "Sir," reported Sergeant Yuna, "we're receiving a priority message from Council Admiral Yu Jin." "Put it through." Yu Jin's image appeared on the main screen, his alien features showing clear frustration. "Lieutenant Min Ho, I know you can hear this. I also know that my ship's computer problems are not coincidental." Min Ho smiled. "Admiral, if you're experiencing technical difficulties, perhaps you should contact your maintenance staff." "My point exactly. This is unnecessary. We're not here to threaten human space. We're just trying to reach our patrol stations in the outer sectors. Then I suggest you use routes that don't pass through human territory. That would add 2 weeks to our travel time. That sounds like a Council problem, not a human problem." The transmission ended, but the message was clear. The Council's military was being forced to acknowledge human authority over human space, just like any other sovereign power. Dr. Kyung-soo's latest intelligence report painted the complete picture. Council authority is collapsing faster than their leadership can respond to. Military threats are ineffective due to human technological superiority. Economic pressure is failing because species are discovering they can prosper without Council oversight. Political authority is evaporating because the fundamental premise that species need Council guidance has been proven false. The report continued, with a prediction that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Estimate complete transformation of galactic political structure within 1 year. The Council will either adapt to become a voluntary cooperation organization or cease to exist as a governing body. President Ji-hai read the report in her office on Earth, then called her cabinet together for an emergency meeting. "The situation is developing faster than we anticipated," she told her assembled ministers. "We need to be ready to help manage the transition to a new galactic order." "What kind of help?" asked Foreign Minister Taeho. "The kind that proves we're not just destroying the old system, we're offering something better to replace it." The next phase of humanity's quiet revolution was about to begin. The chamber that had once housed the Galactic Council looked very different now. Gone were the floating platforms arranged in rigid hierarchies, replaced by circular seating where delegates from dozens of species could face each other as equals. The massive throne where Speaker Velthak had presided for centuries sat empty, a monument to a system that no longer existed. Ambassador Taeho stood at the central podium, but this time he wasn't delivering ultimatums. He was opening the first Galactic Independence Conference, a gathering that 6 months ago would have been unthinkable. 6 months ago, humanity said a simple word to the Council. "No," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Today we gather not to destroy what came before, but to build something better." The audience was remarkable in its diversity. Former Council species sat next to groups that had never been allowed membership. The Krix delegation sat comfortably next to human representatives. Species that had feared each other under Council manipulation now worked together on trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Velthak himself was present, no longer as a supreme authority, but as a representative of the insectoid collective. The transformation had been painful for him personally, but he had adapted faster than many of his former colleagues. "The old system failed because it was based on fear and control," continued Taeho. "The new order we're building here is based on cooperation and mutual respect." In the audience, Dr. So-young took notes for her final report on the Council's transformation. What had started as humanity's refusal to be controlled had become a galaxy-wide movement toward genuine independence and voluntary cooperation. The changes had been dramatic and swift. The Council's military force had been disbanded when member species withdrew their ships. The Council's trade monopoly collapsed when species began dealing directly with each other. The Council's political authority evaporated when beings realized they didn't need permission to govern themselves. The human approach was brilliant in its simplicity, wrote Dr. So Young in her notes. They didn't attack the system, they just stopped participating in it. By demonstrating that a successful civilization could exist outside Council control, they gave every other species permission to do the same. Admiral Su Jin stood to address the military cooperation portion of the conference. Under the old system, the Council controlled all major military forces and decided when and where they would be deployed. The new model is different. She activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic defense. Independent species maintain their own forces for local defense. Mutual defense agreements create networks of allies who support each other by choice, not by mandate. And instead of one central authority making all decisions, military cooperation happens through voluntary partnerships. The transformation had been remarkably peaceful. Without the Council's military monopoly, there was no central force to impose the old order. Species that had been enemies under Council manipulation found they had no real conflicts when they could negotiate directly. Captain Jin Wu, the destroyer commander who had faced down Admiral Yu Jin's battle fleet, was now serving as military liaison to the conference. His role was to help former Council species understand how to operate independent military forces. The key principle, he explained to a group of military officers from a dozen species, is that your forces serve your people, not some distant authority. You defend your own territory and support your allies because you choose to, not because someone orders you to. The concept was revolutionary for beings whose military traditions had been shaped by centuries of Council oversight. In the economic sector, Captain Dong Hyun was helping establish new trade networks that bypassed the old Council-controlled system entirely. Species could now negotiate directly with each other, setting their own prices and terms without bureaucratic interference. The Kethtar produce excellent minerals, he explained to a group of agricultural worlds. You produce food they need. Instead of selling to Council distributors who mark up prices and control supply, you can trade directly for mutual benefit. The results were immediate and dramatic. Species that had struggled under Council economic policies found themselves prospering in the new free trade environment. Dr. Kyung-soo presented the final analysis of the Council's transformation to the gathered delegates. The old Council has been reconstituted as the Galactic Cooperation Organization. Instead of imposing authority, it facilitates voluntary cooperation. Instead of controlling trade, it provides neutral arbitration services. Instead of demanding tribute, it operates on voluntary contributions from member species. The difference was fundamental. The GCO had no authority to force compliance, no military to enforce decisions, and no economic leverage to coerce behavior. It existed solely to help species work together when they chose to do so. Former Speaker Velthak addressed the conference near its conclusion, his speech marking the official end of the old order. For 3,000 years, the Council operated on the assumption that species needed our guidance to survive and prosper, he said, his once commanding voice now humble. Humanity proved that assumption wrong, not through conquest or destruction, but by simply demonstrating a better way. He paused, looking around the chamber at delegates who were free to leave whenever they chose. Free to ignore anything he said, free to build their own futures. The humans taught us that true strength comes not from controlling others, but from standing on your own. True cooperation happens when equals choose to work together, not when superiors impose their will on subordinates. As the conference concluded, Engineer Hyojin was already working on the next phase, establishing the Independent Species Communication Network, a galaxy-wide system that would allow direct communication between species without central control or monitoring. Information wants to be free, she explained to the technical committee. Under the old system, the Council controlled what species could know about each other. That kept them dependent and fearful. The new network will be open, decentralized, and impossible for any single authority to control. Dr. Jae-min was establishing something equally revolutionary, the first truly independent interspecies research institute. Instead of Council-controlled studies designed to maintain the status quo, the new institute would pursue knowledge for its own sake, sharing discoveries freely among all species. Science advances through open exchange of ideas, he told the first gathering of researchers from across the galaxy. When knowledge is controlled by political authority, both science and politics become corrupted. As delegates began departing for their homeworlds, the transformation was clear. They weren't leaving as subjects reporting back to their superiors. They were leaving as representatives of free peoples, carrying home agreements they had negotiated as equals. President G. Hai delivered the conference's closing address via holographic projection from Earth. 6 months ago, humanity faced a choice: submit to a system we didn't believe in or find the courage to say no. Today, the galaxy faces a new choice: embrace the freedom to determine your own destiny, or recreate the old patterns of control and submission. She paused, looking at the faces of beings from dozens of worlds, species that had rediscovered their own strength and independence. The choice is yours, as it was always meant to be. Humanity will stand with any species that chooses freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect, but we will never again submit to anyone who demands our compliance through fear. As the conference ended and the great chamber slowly emptied, Ambassador Tejo remained behind for a moment, looking at the empty council throne. 6 months ago, humanity had said no to the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Today, that organization no longer existed, replaced by something immeasurably better: a galaxy where species were free to cooperate as equals rather than submit as vassals. The revolution was complete, and it had been won not with weapons or threats, but with the simple revolutionary act of refusing to be controlled. In her final report, Dr. So-Young summarized the transformation in words that would become historic. Humanity's refusal to negotiate with the Council wasn't the end of galactic civilization. It was the beginning of the first truly civilized galaxy in known history. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, shining down on worlds where peoples were free to determine their own destinies, to cooperate by choice rather than by force, and to build futures limited only by their own imagination and courage. The age of imposed authority was over. The age of chosen cooperation had begun.